In this session, let us learn about HTML ID attributes. HTML ID attributes using the ID attribute. The HTML ID attribute is used to specify a unique ID for an HTML element. You cannot have more than one element with the same ID in an HTML document. Example: the ID attribute specifies a unique ID for an HTML element. The value of the ID attributes must be unique with the HTML document. The ID attribute is used to point to a specific style declaration, a style sheet. It is also used by JavaScript to access and manipulate the element with the specific ID. The syntax of ID is write hash character followed by an ID name. Then define the sys properties with curly braces. In the following example, we have an h1 element that points to the ID name myHeader. This h1 element will be styled according to the hash myHeader style definition in the head section. See here, now by writing executive code, hash myHeader heading, background color, padding, text align center. See this ID attribute. Use CSS to style an element with the ID myHeader. See h1 ID is equal to myHeader. By writing executive code, the ID attribute was printed. Use CSS to style an element with the ID myHeader. The ID name is case sensitive. The ID name must contain at least one character, cannot start with a number, and must not contain white spaces, tabs, etc. It should be closed. There should not be any space here. Difference between class and ID. A class name can be used by multiple HTML elements, while an ID name must only be used by one HTML element within the page. See the example on code. By writing and executing this code, using style the element with the ID myHeader. See here, light green, black, 40 pixels, enter. Style all my elements with the same class name city. Again we are using city. Background color orange red, color white, padding 10 pixels. Close it for brackets. See here, now we are using ID myHeader, my cities, and the multiple elements with the same class. City Delhi, city Amravati, we are using city here, city style here. See, by writing and executing this code, style method, myHeader, and using city method, you will get the result this. See difference between class and ID. A class name can be used by multiple HTML elements, while an ID name must only be used by one HTML element within the page. See my cities, this heading, Delhi, Amravati, Hyderabad in red color. HTML bookmarks with ID and links. HTML bookmarks are used to allow readers to jump to specific parts of a web page. Bookmarks can be used if your page is very long. To use a bookmark, you must first create it and then add a link to it. Then when the link is clicked, the page will scroll to the location with the bookmark. See, first create a bookmark with the ID attribute. Here h2 ID is equal C8 chapter 8. Then add a link to the bookmark, jump to chapter 8 from within the same page. See the code and result. See, we are taking Bhagavad Gita example here. Here if hash C8 jump to chapter 8. See here hash C18 jump to chapter 18. Like this you can select the topics by using hashtag and ID tag. ID is equal C4 chapter 4. See by writing and executing this. See now we are here also we used ID C8 chapter 8 for chapter 8. And here we are using ID C10 for chapter 10. See here we are using ID for chapter 18, C18. By writing and executing this code or add a link to the bookmark, jump to chapter 4 from another page. Here is HTML/mo HTML_C4 jump to chapter 4. See here, by writing and executing this code, we will get result. When we click to jump chapter 8 or 18, see it's automatically jump to chapter 8. Using the attribute in JavaScript. The ID attributes can also be used by JavaScript to perform some tasks for the specific element. JavaScript can assess an element with a specific ID with the getElementById method. Use the ID attribute to manipulate text with JavaScript. See here, by writing and executing this code using display result, change text function here, display result document dot get element by id method, my header dot inner HTML. Have a nice day. See here, by writing and executing this code by using get element by method. See the hello world. See, by clicking the change text, automatically hello world change it to have a nice day. Chapter summary. The ID attribute is used to specify a unique ID for an HTML element. The value of the ID attributes must be unique within the HTML document. The ID attribute is used by CSS and JavaScript to style or select a specific element. The value of the ID attributes is a case sensitive. The ID attribute is also used to create HTML bookmarks. JavaScript can access an element with a specific ID with the getElementById method. Okay friends, this is the end of HTML part 38, HTML ID attributes. In next video, let us learn about another topic, iframes. If you like our program, please like, subscribe and press bell icon for our next part video updates. Thank you friends. Meet you in next video. All the best.